Hello my friends, Jacob Moran here, aka Majorbacon, and I'd like to welcome you to our first dive into Objective 1.1, identify the prerequisites and components needed for vSphere implementation, as we begin working through the Majorbacon study guide on the VCP Data Center Virtualization 2020 exam. So at its core, what is vSphere? Well, the virtualization element is a server called ESXi. And it's this ESXi server that is going to host virtual machines. And because any one server only has so many resources to go around, we'll end up deploying multiple ESXi hosts in order to support lots of virtual machines. But then managing all those ESXi hosts on an individual basis becomes a pain. So therefore we deploy what's known as a vCenter server, which could still be an installation of a server service that runs on top of a Windows server platform, but more likely is actually going to be a special virtual machine that's going to run on one of your hosts called the vCenter Server Appliance. And so there are interfaces that support directly accessing ESXi, and more likely, most of the time, we're going to do most of our management by going to the central management system of the vCenter server or server appliance. Now, of course, our goal right now is to talk about prerequisites. And one of the best places to talk about prerequisites is right here at vmware.com on the Vmware Compatibility Guide. You can use this guide to specifically select individual host types like server systems that you want to look at, maybe reference a particular partner that you might be working with. And when we update and view results, it'll tell you specifically, here's hardware that's going to work for you. And this goes far beyond, though, just specific server platforms and processors into things like storage and working with other components like operations and orchestrator and web client. And it's all about what things are compatible, what things will fit with each other. But with that said, let me give you just a couple of prerequisites to know and love. Number one, when we're talking about ESXi 6.7, it's going to require a minimum of 2 CPU cores and 4 gigabytes of memory. And in the BIOS configuration, you better make sure that the no execute switch is enabled, which helps to secure memory, and make sure that hardware virtualization support is enabled. And on the networking side of things, we need to support a minimum of a 1 gigabit network interface card and a minimum disk installation of 5.2 gigabytes for any local SAN or iSCSI disk is going to be required. If I was booting off USB, I could actually get away with as little as a 1 gigabyte disk, but typically I actually recommend you go ahead and have an 8 gigabyte disk because it uses something called a scratch disk, and it's great to have those in place. Now, as I mentioned on the vCenter server side, 6.7 is the last version to support a vCenter server on top of Windows Server, because VMware vastly prefers running on top of their own Photon Linux installation with their built-in Postgres database, instead of working with Windows Server, which also needs to tie into a SQL-based database or an Oracle database. Now, when we roll out the vCenter server appliance, which we said is a virtual machine, we need to be aware that it's going to take up anywhere from 2 to 24 virtual CPUs, from 10 to 48 gigabytes of memory, and anywhere from 250 to nearly a terabyte of storage. And these ranges all have to do with the number of hosts and VMs we're supporting. If we're running at the 10 host and 100 VM level, then we're on the left side of the track. But if we're on the far right, we're talking about supporting up to 2,000 ESXi hosts and up to 35,000 virtual machines. If you are working with this legacy vCenter server on Windows Server environment, essentially your physical requirements on this box are going to be the same as what they would be virtually as a VM. They'll just be real CPUs instead of virtual CPUs. And the vCenter server is going to run as a service. So you're going to want to set up a service account, typically in Active Directory, that is a local administrator on that Windows box and has the log on as a service right. And I guess I should mention that there is a post-GRE database available, but it is very limited. It only supports up to 20 hosts and 200 VMs. And then I guess one very last thing, we are going to be typically interacting with ESXi and the vCenter server appliances using a browser-based interface. And there are two, the vSphere client and the vSphere web client. The vSphere web client is the legacy Flash-based interface to manage our environment, which means yes, Flash is a prerequisite. If we're using the more modern and nearly 100% equivalent vSphere client, it runs directly with HTML5 in the browser and doesn't need any other additional support. All right, my friends, Objective 1.1 of the vSphere exam in the bag. And if you like what you experienced, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel. And if you enjoy this content, I'm a full-time trainer over at CBT Nuggets, and that is where I put my best work. And I'd love to see you over there, having a chance to delve in depth in this subject and many more. But for now, my friends, keep it real. And if you can't keep it real, at least keep it virtual.